New at 10, more than 2 decades after a 15-year-old Spanish Fork teen vanished without a trace, a single letter changed the course of her case.
Yeah, to this day, Kiplyn Davis remains have never been found, but Timmy Olson pleaded guilty to manslaughter. That was back in 2005. He's never said a word about her disappearance or the whereabouts of her remains, and will be let out of prison in just days after serving his sentence.
Tonight, Jim Spiewak sat down with the former U.S. Attorney for Utah who received that letter and talks about how Kiplyn's disappearance went from a dead end to a federal grand jury and later to a plea for manslaughter.
We have found Elizabeth Smart.
Spring of 2003, Elizabeth Smart had just been found alive, which was a nationally known case that had just been solved. Meanwhile, inside the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Utah, Paul Warner opens a letter that will change another family's fate.
He explained that he had a daughter, Kiplyn, who at age 15 had disappeared from Spanish Fork in 1995.
The letter, penned by Richard Davis, Kiplyn Davis's father, then asked a simple question, one Warner could not answer.
I don't understand how or why so much resource was dedicated, federal, state, and local, to investigating and finding her, and none of that resource was dedicated towards finding my daughter.
Warner says the question stayed with him and he decided to act.
I have to be honest, it really bothered me.
Warner's office got to work and found what local authorities could not break, a wall of silence in Spanish Fork.
That Timmy Brent Olson and others had really intimidated the community into silence.
Murder cases are typically handled by the state, so federal prosecutors went after what they could prove, perjury. In 2005, Timmy Brent Olson and others were indicted.
Olson, in my opinion, was arrogant enough to think that he could go in and lie to the grand jury and get out of any trouble that he was potentially in. That was a big mistake.
At sentencing, federal rules let the judge use harsher guidelines to determine the perjury sentence, pushing the prison term for Olson to more than 12 years. The state later charged Olson with murder based on an alleged confession, and he pled guilty to manslaughter.
Do you feel like that letter and you getting the grand jury together and starting this investigation into Timmy on the federal side ultimately helped lead to his state plea of manslaughter?
There's no question, and I don't say that to take any credit, because if there's any credit due, it's to the great hardworking people who actually did the investigation.
But for Warner, the case was never just legal.
Richard Davis said to me, he said, someday, Paul, he said, when you die and go to heaven, he said there's going to be a little 15-year-old redheaded girl that's going to run up to you, and she's going to hug you. And I've never forgotten that.
Kiplyn's remains have still never been found.
What would you say to Timmy, on the day that he walks out, if anything?
Just do the right thing. And that means, to the extent that you know, and we think you do, where the remains are of Kiplyn Davis.
You surprised that he's never said anything?
I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised. But I have to say that there are just some people that are not motivated the same way the rest of us are. He had really nothing to lose and everything to gain, but he still chose not to do that.
Olson will be released from prison on February 10th, but Utah law changed back in 2021, shortly before he had a parole hearing. Olson was asked at that hearing, and he denied to say where Kiplyn's remains are, telling the parole board he has already said everything that he can, and that is a question I got the chance to ask one of his attorneys again more recently.
Why not say anything more if he really does know? Does he still have the position that he's not going to say anything more about what happened that day back in 1995, or where Kiplyn's remains are?
I didn't ask him that. I didn't go into that. I just basically went into what he's done in the last 18 years to prepare himself for February 10th.
And he is ready to just move on.
I think so.
Coming up in my next report, I'm going to share more of my interview with his attorney, the audio of the parole hearing from 2021, and if double jeopardy can apply after Olson walks free in February. I'm reporting in studio tonight, Jim Spiewak, KUTV 2 News.